Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Catherine and this is Raspberry Reads. I participated in Read Historical Fiction 2025 that was co-hosted by several people here on booktube, and it was mainly hosted by Shelly-ish, and it was really good fun. I did this last year and had a good time focusing on historical fiction in the month of June, and so I decided to participate again this year. And so I know a little bit late in doing this wrap-up video for what I read for Read Historical Fiction 2025, but that's because I had two historical fiction novels on the go, and I really wanted to finish them into the first week of July, before giving you my thoughts on all the books that I read. So yeah, without further ado, here are all of my thoughts on the books I read for Read Historical Fiction 2025. So the first book I read was The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davies. And this is a dual time narrative, partly set in New York, at the Museum of Modern Art, and just before the Met Gala. So the protagonist is, well, there's two protagonists really, but one of them is an Egyptologist and she works at the museum, and the other one is an assistant to the director of the Met Gala. And these two women end up going on an adventure to Egypt, and the whole story has to do with recovering a stolen artifact. And the other part of the narrative is that the Egyptologist has this sort of troubling past when she was in Egypt originally. Now, I really liked the premise of this story, and I did enjoy reading it. I just really didn't like the ending. I thought it was all sort of wrapped up too neatly, sort of disingenuous emotions within it, and yeah, it just wasn't for me. So I would say 2/3 of the book I would have given it sort of 4 stars, because I really did enjoy both time period narratives. And then the ending, in my opinion, let it down so much that I ended up giving The Stolen Queen 3 stars. I listened to this on audiobook, and I will put the narrator in the description for you. So I'll have to put all of the explanation for all the prompts for Read Historical Fiction 2025 down in the description, because I can't remember who suggested what. But I think Brittany, from Literarily Smitten, I think she suggested dual timeline. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, so this story could meet that criteria. And then there was also another prompt about art, and so the Met Gala historical artifact would fit that category as well. The next book I read was Wandering Souls by Cecile, and this is again a dual timeline historical fiction about the Vietnamese boat people and how they had to emigrate from Vietnam during the war in Vietnam, and resettled in the UK. And so the story looks at this sibling group, or part of the sibling group, who make a very courageous journey from Vietnam to, I think, Hong Kong, and then over to England, and resettle in England after being in a refugee camp. It was a fantastic story. It covers from the 70s into the 90s, I think, or maybe later than that. And it looks at these siblings as they grow up, and how they adapt their environments, and how they maintain aspects of their culture, but also acclimatize to life in the UK. And it was just a really nice book. It was very emotive. I don't think I'd ever read anything specifically about the Vietnamese boat people before, so that was interesting to learn more about that history. And it was also really interesting to read more about that particular immigrant experience in the UK. So I gave Wandering Souls 4 stars. I thought it was a fantastic book, and I would recommend it if you like that sort of narrative, I suppose. Next up, I read The Settlement by Jock Serong. And again, this was an audiobook, and this is a historical fictionalized account of a settlement off the coast of Tasmania, and it looks at the forced relocation of certain indigenous tribes, indigenous peoples in Tasmania to this particular island. And it also has a little bit to do with sort of convicts and relocating criminals from the UK to a settlement there as well. And it's set in this new settlement, and it looks at sort of the life of the colonizers there, their interactions with the indigenous people, and the sort of trials and tribulations of having this isolated colony. So it does highlight, in a very real and moving way, the colonialist aspects, the abuse and forced removal of indigenous people, and it also looks at aspects of the church and abuse. So it was really a hard book to read, to listen to, but nonetheless, I did learn an awful lot about that time period and the history of Tasmania, which I knew nothing about before, despite having taken history of Australia and New Zealand, a class in my undergrad. I didn't come across any of this history, so it was really worthwhile reading. I enjoyed Jack Serong's writing style. I enjoyed the narration, and I gave this book 4 stars. Next up, we have The Woman Who Went Over Niagara Falls in a Barrel by Caroline Cauchi. And this was such a left field pick for me. I just happened to stumble across it on the Libby app. I'd never heard of this book before. I don't think it has very many reviews on Goodreads. And this is a historical fiction, fictionalized retelling of Annie Edson Taylor, I think that's her name, who was the first woman to go over Niagara Falls in a barrel and survive. And it was a really good story. The author did a lot of research in trying to uncover the story about Annie Edson Taylor and a lot of the forgotten aspects of her. And it's quite sad in a way because she was really underappreciated during her life, despite having made this accomplishment. But I think more poignantly, the author uncovered a lot about Annie's generosity and sort of charitable attitude toward life, especially in supporting other women. And that is woven throughout the story, and it really brings her life to life. So I really liked this story. It was a long book, though. I think it was over 700 pages on the Libby ebook. So it did take me a while to get through it, but I did enjoy it. In that format, the only thing that I'm a little bit puzzled by is, firstly, I enjoyed the fact that there were different styles of text throughout the book. So you had the standard narrative, letters between various people, telegrams, and also newspaper articles. The only thing with the newspaper articles is they were written in like a narrow column and off, for the most part, went down and like abruptly ended on the page. And I don't know whether that is intentional or whether it's the formatting of the ebook that has cut off a bit of the text. But besides that, I really enjoyed it. It was very like feminist narrative. I liked that it took place at Niagara Falls, which, even though it was centered in Buffalo in the US, it did have a sort of Canadian element to it. And yeah, I gave this book 4 stars. And this one covers the prompt of, I think it was Shelley's prompt about like the biographical about a famous person. Next up, I just recently finished reading The Dream Weavers by Barbara Erskine. I have not read anything by Barbara Erskine before. My mum is a pretty big fan of her. She enjoyed reading The Lady of Hay back when it came out. But so I just happened to find this one available and started reading it again. It was a pretty long book. And I must admit, I struggled to get through a good chunk of it. It's essentially about, well, different people are involved. So there's a priest, and his wife is like a mystic, and she is communicating with ghosts from the time of King Aoife. So like Aoife's dike is it was a dike that is like borders Wales and Herefordshire in the UK. And King Aoife was, I think, from like 700 AD. My history of that time period is not so good, but way back when, sort of 1600, 600s, 700s, there's King Aoife, and it has to do with that storyline. And then there's also a historian who's looking at old manuscripts, and his children come to visit, and they're all staying at a cottage in Herefordshire. And then there's multiple time periods where they're going back in time, and sort of like Outlander, that type of vibe where they travel back in time and interact with all of these people, and then boom, they're back in the present. So it was very much like historical fiction, but with ghosts or supernatural element to it, and that I didn't quite get on with. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't really remember what happened at the end of the book because I got bored towards the end. So yeah, I think I would give the Dreamweavers sort of 3.5 stars. It wouldn't necessarily be one that I would recommend, to be honest. So yes, without having the prompts in front of me, I think there was, so Shelley's was about a real remarkable person. So that one I thought of the woman who went over Niagara Falls in a barrel, Annie Edson Taylor. There was Brittany's, which is the dual timelines, and quite a few of the books covered that. There was the art one, which the Stolen Queen covers. There was an alternate history, which I think to some extent the settlement and the woman who went over Niagara Falls in a barrel covers. And then there's the one about the specific event. Lots of them kind of covered that, whether that's the Niagara Falls one or the migration of the Vietnamese boat people. So yeah, thank you very much for hosting Read Historical Fiction 2025, all of you lovely booktubers. I hope you've enjoyed my wrap up, and I will see you all soon in a new video. Take care. Bye.